Hello, so this is for the subject Managerial Accounting for HR students, and the topic for this one is budgeting for businesses or for companies, and we have here an article from Investopedia.com. Alright, so let's begin with the definition of a budget. So a budget is a forecast of revenue and expenses over a specified future period. Okay, budgets are utilized by corporations, governments, and households, and are an integral part of running a business or household efficiently or organizations. Budgeting for companies serves as a plan of action for managers as well as a point of comparison at a period's end. Okay? Alright, so yung budget, normally piniprepare siya ng companies on a regular basis, pero normally, annual basis. Kumbaga nakasabay din siya dun sa financial year or accounting period ng isang business, okay? So, before mag-start, normally, proposals or budget proposals are asked from the different departments before mag-start yung, panibagong taon. But for the most part, yung proposals kasi ng maraming departments, ang ginagawa ng accounting or ng finance department is, of course, kino-collect and then kino-consolidate para malaman kung magkano ba yung total proposals from all departments. And then on the part of the accounting, the process is actually simple lang pakinggan pero medyo madugo, especially kapag kailangan mag-cost cutting. Okay? So, si accounting or si finance, what they do is that they project or they estimate the revenue for the next period. So, they could take into account yung historical growth ng revenues and then, make adjustments kapag merong, let's say, is the company planning to increase the production of its products or the provision of its services, or may balak ba silang itaas yung prices na sometimes it could have an adverse effect on the sales volume. And then, may balak ba sila na, to provide extensive marketing or promotion for the product. So, after those considerations, those are just some of the considerations. Meron pang others then. But after considering after considering all those factors, they could adjust yung estimated total revenue for the incoming year. Okay, and then after that, normally, so you have your revenue, diba? And then the next one is yung mga expenses. Yung mga expenses, ito yung mga manggagaling mismo sa mga departments kasi sila yung nakakaalam kung magkano ba yung ginagastos nila on an annual basis, magkano yung kailangan nila for specific items or specific expenses. Sila yung nakakaalam. Alright, so that's why they have to propose their, submit their proposal, budget proposal sa accounting. Okay, but the problem there is that normally kapag na-consolidate na yung mga budget proposals from various departments, mas malaki yung total proposed expenses compared dun sa estimated revenue ni accounting or ni finance, okay? Wala namang kaso or walang masyadong magiging problema if yung proposals ng mga department is within or mas mababa dun sa estimated revenue ng accounting, okay? But ang nagiging problem kasi normally is mas mataas talaga yung proposed expenses kesa dun sa revenue. And in a way, di ba, hindi naman natin pwedeng hayaan yun. Kasi kung i-approve natin lahat yun, the expectation would be loss ang magiging performance ng company. So what the accounting or the finance do is that, binabawasan or tinatapyasan or kino-cost cut yung ibang items na proposed ng mga departments. Of course, titingnan din naman yan ng titingnan din naman yan ng accounting. Reasonable ba yung amount na nilagay ng department for a particular item or expense. Okay, kung reasonable, edi okay, konting adjustments lang siguro, papababay ng konti. Pero kung hindi siya reasonable, let's say, ba't parang ang taas? Okay, merong mga ganun. Depending on the item, on the nature of the item, and on the prices currently in the market. Karaniwan naman alam yan sa accounting, kung magkano yung bilihan ng mga items. Okay? Let's say computer, printers, ganyan. So, ayan, pag masyadong, questionable yung price and pwede naman siya mapababa talaga, can do two things. Okay, it's either you try to confirm it with the department na nag-submit ng proposal. Bakit po kaya ganito yung amount na nilagay nyo? Parang sobrang taas. Okay? And then, pwede mong banggitin na currently, itong items po na to na nilagay niya is these could be bought for a lower price naman. Ayan. So, kumbaga, communication pa rin is the key. Hindi yung basta-basta mo na lang i-cost cut. Pero kung wala talagang, choice, kundi mag-cost cut across all departments, then sometimes later na lang yung communication. But if, normal situation naman, edi, of course, communication. Para alam din nila yung, i-expect na okay, binawasan pala ng accounting yung budget natin for this year, binabaan, okay? So, essentially, ang gagawin ni accounting is to, try to lower the total expenses hanggang sa maabot niya yung revenue level. Magpang-abot sila, kahit pa paano mag-break even man lang, or kumbaga zero, walang profit, walang loss, or kung kaya, edi, syempre, magkaroon ng konting profit naman yung company. Okay? So, essentially, ganun yung process of budgeting. Nagsisimula talaga sa income statement. Kasi normally, ang panggagalingan naman kasi ng pondo nung company is yung benta talaga ng products or services. Okay? Unless meron siyang, let's say, project, magpapatayo ng panibagong building, and instead of using the savings from previous years, pwede niya maging source of fund, let's say, mangungutang siya sa financial institutions or something, or mag-i-issue siya ng mga panibagong shares para magkaroon ng capital. Ayan. So, yun yung process ng paggawa ng budget. Tapos ini-issue siya, yung approved na ng management, ini-issue siya sa bawat department, tapos yung mga bawat department, yun yung magiging guide nila. Syempre, kasi yun lang yung pera na inallocate sa kanila, fund na inallocate sa kanila ng management. So, dun lang iikot. Yung mga activities na pwede nilang gawin, mga materials, items na pwede nilang bilhin, for them to conduct or to render yung kanilang services to the company, yung ma-fulfill nila yung kanilang duties and responsibilities then as a department and as employees. So, magiging guide nila yung budget. Okay? The budgeting process for companies can be challenging, particularly if customers don't pay on time or revenue and sales are intermittent. Okay? Eto. Okay, so di ba you have your, let's say, meron nang natanggap yung bawat department na approved budget, okay? Hindi porke sinabi na approved budget is matatanggap mo lahat yung amount na andon, okay? You have to take into account ito nga, yung customers natin, nagbabayad ba on time? And of course, di ba yung revenue naman natin, hindi naman yung kinikita at the beginning of the year. Kinikita yan ng company throughout the year and normally evenly, throughout the year. So, merong ibang types of businesses na meron nga silang peak season tapos meron silang mga low season, okay? So, yung pag-release ng budget will depend on the collection din ng company, okay? Kaya normally, ang ginagawa, di ba you have your annual budget, i-chop-chop mo yan into 12, gumawa ka ng monthly budget, tapos for a particular month, yung portion na yun lang ang normally, pwede mong i-request from the finance department. Okay? Kasi nga, nakadepende din sa collection from customers kasi baka mamaya maliit lang yung collection for that particular month. Tapos, syempre, hindi lang naman ikaw ang department ng company. Meron pang other departments din na may kanya-kanya rin silang request. And of course, ang company merong priority yan. Unang priority, salaries and wages. So, sa HR, medyo pagdating dun sa budget ng salaries and wages, solved na kayo kasi in a way, mandated by the law yan. So, talagang pinaprioritize niya ng companies. Before pa mag-release ng funds for, other items, nag-iipon muna or yung collection, so you set aside muna para maging payroll fund ng company. Okay? Tapos, aside from the payroll, ano pa ba yung pinaprioritize ng company? Utilities. Siyempre, kailangan magbayad, kundi puputulan ng kuryente or ng tubig, ng internet, ganyan. Okay? And then, let's say, manufacturer yung company. So, of course, pa-prioritize niya yung pagbili ng raw materials for the production, maintenance yung, factory machineries and equipment, ganyan. Okay? So, ayun. So, yeah, it would depend on the priorities din ng company. So, let's say kahit may approved budget ka na ganyang amount, let's say yung company is, hindi pa kasi namin napupunuan yung payroll fund. Okay, so most likely, either ipopostpone muna yung pag-approve, pag-release ng budget for that request, or pwede rin niyang ma-decline. Kung let's say hindi mo siya kayang i-postpone kasi gagawin niyo na sila for this month, tapos wala namang available budget, edi, it's either ma-decline din yan. Okay, so hindi na talaga matutuloy. Okay, so that's why at the end of the year, or at the end of every period, let's say minomonitor nyo ng monthly or quarterly yung budget, normal talaga na merong differences, yung actual na expense ng departments compared dun sa nakalagay sa kanilang budget. Kasi hindi naman lahat talaga nare-release. Although approved budget siya, hindi siya yung totally nare-release talaga. Kasi nga, depending on the timing of collection and then of course, priority expenses ng company, alin yung inuuna nilang pondohan. Alright? So, please remember that. And then, so yan. During the monitoring, ang tinitingnan normally is, mas kailangan yung actual na na-release sa isang particular na department, hindi lalampas dun sa budgeted na amounts. Kasi normally, hindi naman talaga hinahayaan na lumampas dun sa budgeted amounts yung marirelease sa mga departments. Unless, meron silang, justification na kailangan po talaga itong fund na to for this particular request kasi ganito, ganyan. Okay, so since na-justify siya, nilalapit sa management, and then of course, kailangan ng approval ng management, before siya then i-release ni finance. Okay, and then of course, pag na-release siya ni finance, normally magre-reflect yun sa monitoring na mas malaki yung actual kaysa sa budget. Okay, and in that sense, kailangan lang naman is, for the monitoring, kailangan mo lang namang malaman kung bakit ganun yung naging situation. So, if it's reasonable, and dumaan naman siya dun sa process ng, in-approve ng management, edi okay lang. Okay? But in some instances, wherein yung isang particular item sumobra sa budget, okay, tapos ay wala namang, parang hindi naman dumaan sa approval, wala namang naging request from the management. So, you have to look into that, kasi para siyang anomaly, could be a cause for concern. So, kailangan yung i-check bakit ganun yung nangyari when it shouldn't have happened kasi. Okay? And then, in cases naman na mas mababa, you have your budget, tapos yung actual mababa. In a way, that's acceptable and that's a good situation. But, meron pa rin siyang negative connotation. Okay? Minsan kasi merong mga departments na ino-overestimate yung kanilang proposals. Kasi alam nga nila na magka-cost cutting, ganyan. So, ang expectation nila, tinataasan nila yung figures para pag nag-cost cut, bababa yun. Pero yung matitira sa kanila is, sapat pa din sa kanilang pangangailangan. Okay? Style yan ng ibang departments. Okay? But anyway, so ganyan pag ganun yung ginawa nila, tapos, during the year naman, hindi nila nagagamit na maayos yung kanilang budget, ang question kasi doon is, why did you put that in your budget kung hindi mo naman siya gagamitin? Hindi mo naman siya ni-utilize, okay? Nilaanan ka ng management, ng budget for that, so why didn't you use it, okay? Normally, kapag ganun na nangyayari, especially sa government, the following year, hindi ka nabibigyan ng budget for that particular item. Or yung ibibigay sa'yo na budget is kasing laki lang nung ginamit mo the previous year. Okay? Kasi ang concern kasi doon is that sa halip na nagamit yung budget na yan for, other items na, or other departments na nangangailangan ng budget, hindi kasi inallocate namin sa'yo, tapos hindi mo lang naman pala gagamitin. Okay? So, in a way, hindi kasi siya efficient use of resources. Kasi hindi nagamit yung budget. Andiyan yung budget pero hindi nagamit. Kumbaga, nasayang lang, hindi siya nagamit, hindi nakapag-contribute sa company's, optimization ng revenue para mapalaki ang revenue. Okay? Or, magamit siya sa expenses, magko-contribute din to increase the revenue. Okay? So, may mga ganon. So, in a way, hindi rin kagandahan yung kapag yung actual na expenses is mas mababa sa budget. In a way, it's good kasi, makakatipid yung company, but efficiency ng utilization of resources, hindi siya maganda pa din. Okay? So, kailangan yung, tipong hindi naman saktuhan, pero maliit lang yung difference dapat ng actual expenses dun sa budgeted resources for that particular item. Ayan. The budgeting process for companies, nabasa na pala natin to. Sorry. This one, there are several types of budgets that companies use, including operating budgets. Itong operating, of course, normally about the operations, expenses related to the operations, production, ganyan. And then you have your master budgets. Yung master budget, yung overall pangkalahatan ng company, okay? And then, of course, from the master budget, dyan huhugutin yung, individual departmental budget, okay? Tapos yung master budget, pwede kang magkaroon ng static and flexible budget, okay? Yung static, kumbaga, isang set lang siya talaga. Yung flexible, let's say kapag may changes in the production, gagawin mo siya ng, ng budget for each, okay? So, kunwari, ang planned production is 100,000 units in a month. So, meron kang budget na for 100,000 units. Tapos, in case na taasan nila, gawin nilang 120,000 units, you have a separate budget for 120,000 units. Okay? Or 150,000 units, you also provide. Okay? So, that's why it's called flexible. Na if merong changes in the production process or in the production volume, mag-adjust din siyempre yung budget. Hindi pwedeng same budget lang, pero yung production mo for this month is 100,000, tapos the following month, 150,000. So, in a way, before ka rin naman gumawa ng budget doon is you have to ask or communicate with the production department. Ano bang plano nila? Are they going to consistently produce the same amount of units, or are they planning to increase during a certain month or to lower it during certain months? Ganyan. Okay? So, yan. Communication pa din. Okay, so in this article, we explore how companies approach budgeting as well as how companies deal with missing their budgets. Okay. Takeaways: budget, a forecast of revenue and expenses over a specified period, and is an integral part of running a business efficiently. Okay. So normally, 1 year, yung specified period, pero meron din namang companies na nagpo-provide na, projected 5-year budget, ganyan. Pero normally, yung mga ganon, long-term budgets, subject for a lot of adjustments. So, pinaka-best na din yung annual budgets lang. Okay? A static budget is a budget with numbers based on planned outputs and inputs for each of the firm's divisions. Okay? Cash flow budget helps managers determine the amount of cash being generated by a company during a period. Tapos you have flexible budgets, contain the actual results, and are compared to the company's static budget to identify any variances. Ayan. So, a bit of correction. Yung sa cash flow budget, diba, you have your income, revenue, revenue, income and revenue, and then less the expenses, and then you have your deductions then for, let's say, interest payments kung may loan yung company, and then of course you have your loan payments, and then you have your capital outlays. Kumbaga, hindi siya natatapos dun sa revenue minus expenses equals net profit or loss, diba? Kasi dito sa income statement, hindi mo makikita yung paggagamitan ng cash. Let's say, bumili ng panibagong machinery. Nagbayad ng utang. Okay? So, ayun. Yung cash flow budget, kumbaga, i-extend mo yung budget to take into account yung mga other items na hindi nag-appear dun sa revenue and expenses na paggagamitan nyo pa rin naman ng cash. Okay? Para alam mo kung magkano yung matitira na cash sa company after spending them on all the other items pa. Okay? Normally, sa cash flow budget, of course, hindi sinasama yung depreciation kasi non-cash expense naman ang depreciation. But if the company is planning to acquire new fixed assets in the future, panibagong machinery, panibagong sasakyan, panibagong building, so pwede sila set aside or create ng fund na ilalagay din sa budget, na another paggagamitan na cash. Okay? So that they could find magkano ba talaga yung cash na available sa company after considering mga other expenses nila. Hindi naman siya expense actually, but other items na paggagamitan ng cash. Okay? So, yan. Tapos yung flexible budget, ayan. So, nabanggit natin kanina, di ba kanina, ay yung, at different production levels. Okay, pero yung binanggit niya dito, parang comparison na flexible budget, you have your, yung approved budget, and then you have your actual na currently ay nagagamit, sorry, nagagamit ng department. Okay, and then yung difference ng dalawang yon, that's what we call variance. So, for example, marketing expense, okay? Ang budget nung company is 100,000. Ang nagagamit pa lang ng company is, let's say, for the whole year, ang nagamit lang niya ay 50,000. So, may variance na, yung difference ng dalawa, may variance na 50,000. So, 50%, And then, yung variance na yun, of course, in a way, i-review ng finance department. Why is it na merong ganito kalaking variance? Anong nangyari? The following year, bababaan na ba natin yung particular item na to? Or next year ba, may balak sila na gamitin na to? So, you have to, again, communicate those variances. And then yung mga variances, again, yung nabanggit naman din natin kanina. So, kumbaga, you just have to justify it and see if it's reasonable or not. Okay? Next natin, how budgets work. Although the budgeting process for companies can become complex, at its most basic, a budget compares a company's revenue with its expenses in a given period. Determining how much to spend on various expenses and projecting sales is only part of the process. Company executives also have to contend with a myriad of other factors, including projecting capital expenditures. Ayan. May balak ba silang bumili nga ng new fixed assets, machineries, equipment, building, or land, or vehicles, which are large purchases of fixed assets such as machinery, new factory. They must also plan for their ongoing cash needs, operating, revenue shortfalls, baka mamaya magkaroon ng decrease in the revenue compared to last year, and the economic backdrop. Ano yung current economic situation na ginagalawan ng company? Is it favorable or unfavorable? Okay. Regardless of the type of business, the ability to gauge performance using budgets is critical to a company's overall financial health. Okay? So, ayan. In a way, yung mga departments, pwedeng maging performance indicator nila yung how well do they use their budget. Sometimes, okay? Sa mga departments, meron tayong tinatawag na revenue centers. Ito yung mga departments na nag-generate ng income. Tapos, of course, they do have expenses as well. So, in a way, tinatawag sila na profit centers. Revenue or profit centers. And then the other one, the second one, yung tinatawag natin na cost centers. Yung cost centers, hindi sila nag-generate ng revenue. Pero, relevant sila in conducting or operating the business. Meron silang role pa rin na ginagampanan. And they do have expenses or costs. That's why they are called cost centers. Okay? So, example natin sa school, Of course, yung mga departments, mga colleges, di profit centers sila, meron silang revenue generated kasi meron silang mga estudyante na nagbabayad ng tuition and other school fees. And then they have their own expenses then, on how para gamitin in their respective departments. So they are revenue centers or profit centers. Tapos on the other hand, we have accounting department, registrar, guidance, clinic. Okay, so these are just examples of departments na, wala namang sariling kinikita from running the school, pero they are an integral part of the operation. So, cost centers sila. Ina-allocated pa din ng budget for them to be able to perform their tasks and, duties and responsibilities. Okay? Ayan. So, in a way, kasi sa businesses, meron tayong tinatawag na efficient utilization of resources. Kailangan yung financial resource ng company nagagamit ng maayos to optimize their performance, and yun na nga ay yung pagpapataas ng revenue or pagpapababa ng expenses na ang ultimate bottom line din naman is mas mataas na profit. Okay? And in a way, that should contribute dun sa overall financial health ng isang company. Okay? Kasi imagine nyo, may pera yung company pero hindi naman ginagamit. Okay? Or malaki yung kinikita ng company pero hindi naman nakakapag-invest in, let's say, new equipment, hindi nakakapag-expand, ganyan. Lumalaki pero hindi nag-expand. Anyway, so yan, inefficient utilization of resources. Kapag ganun yung style, inallocated ka ng malaking budget, tapos konti lang yung nagamit mo. So, that's also inefficient utilization of resources. Okay? Next, we have types of budget. So, ito yung mga most common types of budget. So, yung master budget, yung pangkalahatan ng company. Okay? Tapos, aside from the master budget, of course, you have your departmental, master budgets typically forecast the entire fiscal year, will include projections for items on the income statement, the balance sheet, and the cash flow statement. Normally, pinaka-main, of course, income statement, tapos dinediretso sa cash flow statement. For the balance sheet, hindi naman masyado, These projections can include revenue, expenses, operating costs, sales, and capital expenditures. Sama nyo na rin yung loan payments, ganyan, if meron yung company. Okay, and then static budget with numbers based on planned outputs and inputs for each of the firm's divisions. Usually the first step of budgeting determines how much a company has and how much it will spend. Looks at fixed expenses which are not variable or depends on production volumes and sales. Example nito, rent would be a fixed cost regardless of the sales volume of a company. Okay, so ang pinakang point ng static is that regardless of production, ito yung budget. Okay? Some industries such as non-profits receive donations and grants, resulting in static budget from which they can't exceed. Okay? So of course, yun yung pinakang limit lang talaga nila. Depending on the industry. Other industries use static budgets as a starting point or a baseline number. Similar to the master budget, and make adjustment at the end of the fiscal year if more or less is needed in the budget. Managers use economic forecasting methods to determine realistic numbers. So yun nga, kailangan nare-review yan ng finance department or accounting or finance to make sure na reasonable yung budgets included dun sa mga proposals ng department. Okay? Tapos, ano pa yung babanggitin ko? Ayan, di ba binanggit dito na from which they can't exceed. So you have your budget, yung actual normally hindi dapat lalampas dun sa budget. But there are cases nga na lumalampas siya. So paano siya nangyayari? Of course, marami kayong departments, di ba? It's possible kasi na yung isang particular department, mangangailangan siya ng additional budget. So in a way, pag na-justify niya yung expense, pwede siyang mag-go over the approved budget. And saan kukunin yung actual fund nun. So, of course, meron namang other departments, and sometimes there are departments na, yun nga, hindi naman ginagalaw or hindi ginagamit yung kanilang budget. Okay? So, in a way, dun lang naman kukunin or hihigitin yung fund na ibibigay dun sa mga departments na mag-i-exceed ng kanilang budget. Okay? So, kumbaga, hindi naman lumaki yung revenue. Yung estimation ng revenue, yun pa din. And normally, best estimate na yon, kaya normally hindi na siya na-adjust din. But of course, kung yung actual revenue is lumaki, edi adjust din yung nasa budget. But for the most part, yung adjustments is for institutional use or company use. Hindi na siya dinidistribute to departments. Okay? Next, we have operating budget. So, operating normally yung sa production, So, let's say, salaries and raises, pambili ng raw materials, and then pang bayad or fund for, overhead ng company. Okay? So, yung operating budget includes expenses and revenue generated from day-to-day business operations of the company. Operating budget focuses on the operating expenses, including yung cost of goods sold or direct cost, and the revenue or income. So, yung cost of goods sold, yung nabenta na cost of labor and direct materials that are tied to production. Operating budget represents the overhead and administrative costs directly tied to producing the goods and services. Okay. However, the operating budget doesn't include items such as capital expenditures and long-term debt. Ito yung nasa, sa parting baba pa. After nung net profit, saka pa lang usually pine-present yung capital expenditures, saka long-term debt. Okay, yung next natin is cash flow budget. Helps managers determine the amount of cash being generated by a company during a specific period. So, tinitingnan naman dito is yung inflow and outflow ng pera. Labas or pasok. Siyempre, yung pagpasok ay di galing sa revenue ng company, bayad ng clients or customers. Tapos yung paglabas ng pera ay di bayad ng expenses. And then, of course, bayad din ng utang, pambili ng mga, capital expenditures, yung fixed assets, machinery, equipment, delivery vehicles, building, ganyan. So, yun. Normally, you have your revenue, expenses, net profit. Tapos, if you want, it's either gumawa ka ng separate for the cash flow budget or idiretso mo na lang yung sa income statement. Kasi, yun na lang naman natitira yung sa pinakang dulo. Present mo yung capital expenditures and loan payments and, other items na paggagamitan nyo pa ng cash. Okay? Tapos, yun ang bottom line niya is available cash. Okay? If meron pa. Okay? For example, monitoring the collection of accounts receivables, which is money owed by customers, if nagpapautang yung company. So, can help companies forecast the cash due in a particular period. So, kumbaga yan, using internal information, pwedeng i-compute din ng company, kung gaano, tawag dito, yung frequency ng pagbabayad ng mga customers. During a given month, normally magkano yung natatanggap na cash ng company from their customers. Okay? Tapos, of course, ibabangga mo siya dun sa how much the company is spending on a given month. Okay? The process can be challenging if too many customers are past due. Yes. To compensate for this, many businesses create something called an allowance for doubtful accounts, which estimates the amount of accounts receivable that are expected to not be collectible. Yes. So, nagpapautang, kaakibat ng pagpapautang yung risk, na hindi magbabayad yung customer. Okay, so in that sense, nagsaset din naman, tinitake into account yon ng companies, nagsaset sila ng allowance for doubtful accounts. Okay, tapos of course, yung allowance kasi for doubtful accounts, parang, in a way, expense na rin siya. Or hindi naman siya expense, pero kabawasan dun sa fund available for use ng company. Okay? Cash flow budgets helps to examine past practices, to examine what's working and what's not, and make adjustments. Okay? Baka kasi mamaya masyadong, let's say, inactive, hindi naman sa inactive, pero let's say, hindi masyadong gumagalaw ang collection department, di ba? Hindi sila masyadong nagpa-follow up ng customers, or let's say, walang collection department yung company, iniintay lang talaga nila na dumating yung client, sila mismo yung, magkusa na magbayad. So, wala silang sinasend out na reminders for the clientele na magbayad sila ng accounts nila or ganyan. Okay? So, there could be room for improvements, or they can shorten yung kanilang credit period. Kung dati inaalaw nila na 60 days before bayaran yung utang ng customers, let's say, paliitin nila, gawin nilang 30 days na lang, para mas mapabilis yung pag-collect ng kanilang accounts. Okay? So, yun yung mga i-check nila, what's working, what's not working, tapos make adjustments, especially dun sa mga what's not working. For example, a company could apply for a short-term working capital line of credit from a bank to ensure they cash in the event a client pays late. Also, companies can ask for more flexible options for their accounts payable. Okay, yung companies din naman, nangungutang din naman yan sa suppliers nila. So, sometimes, pwede silang mag-request naman sa suppliers nila na pwede bang pahabain yung credit term natin? Pwede ba kayo magbigay ng mas malaking discount? Okay, it would depend on the relationship between the company and the supplier in this sense naman. Tapos itong mangungutang sa bank, especially kung may deposit naman yung company in those particular banks, pwede silang mag-open ng credit line na just in case kailangan namin ng pera is madaling makakakuha sa bangko. Okay, kumbaga, yung mga requirements is na-fulfill na, hindi siya actually magkukuha ng loan agad, pero naka-prepare na. Kumbaga, meron ng approval na in case mga ilangan itong company na to, pwede nang bigyan, kasi yung documentary requirements and whatnot is naka-submit na or na-approve na. Okay, line of credit ang tawag doon. Okay, tapos, using a budget to evaluate performance. Another use ng budget, na-evaluate yung performance ng departments. Once a period has ended, management must compare yung forecast from the static or master budget to the company's performance. So, you have nga yung budget, tapos you have your actual, kung magkano talaga yung ginastos ng company. So, yun, titingnan whether the budget came in line with planned expenditures and income. So, una mo i-check, yung revenues, nagtama ba closely, or halos maglapit lang yung amount, or mas malaki ba yung actual, which is, it's a good thing kasi may extra yung company, or mas maliit ba yung actual, in that sense, medyo, kinulang yung company, nag-overestimate. Okay? But for the most part, kapag naman nag-estimate ang accounting or finance, normally ay, conservative. So, more likely than not, yung actual is mas mataas. So, nasa budget. Okay? Kasi conservative naman talaga mga nasa accounting and finance. Kumbaga, mas maigi na yung pagdating sa revenue, mas maigi na yung kulangin kaysa sa magkaroon ng sobra. Tapos, pagdating sa expenses, maigi ng sobra kaysa kulangin. Okay? So, yan yan. Flexible budget containing figures based on actual output. So, yung binanggit natin kanina, depende kay production, gusto nyo ng 100,000 units, 120,000 units, 150,000 units. So, magkakaiba yung budget for the different production volume or production level. The flexible budget is compared to the company's static budget to identify any variances between the forecasted spending and actual spending. Yan. So, ito compared pa rin. With a flexible budget, budgeted dollar values or peso amounts are multiplied by actual units to determine what particular number will be given to a level of output or sales. Diba meron tayong variable cost saka fixed cost, diba? Yung fixed cost, anong volume level nung production, pare-pareho lang yung fixed cost. Diba example nga, rent, okay? Monthly, 10,000, 10,000, 10,000. Kahit ang i-produce mo is 100,000 units, 10,000 pa din yan. 120 units, 10,000 pa din. 150 units, 10,000 pa din. Okay? But for the variable cost, nakadepende siya dun sa volume. Okay? Let's say, ang isang unit ay 5 pesos. So, yung 100,000 units times 5, edi 500,000. So, 120 units times 5, edi 600,000 pesos. So, 150 units times 5, edi 750,000 pesos. Okay? So, nakadepend siya dun sa volume. Okay? Kapag variable cost, edi ganon. Tapos, kapag fixed cost naman, edi same amount lang across different volumes. Ano? Ayan. Tapos, since flexible budgets use the current period's number, sales, revenue, and expenses, kasi kadalasan naman talaga yung budgets ay nakabase din sa historical data. Ano? Companies can calculate various outcomes based on different outputs such as sales or units produced. Flexible or variable budgets help managers plan for both low output and high output to help ready themselves regardless of the outcome. Okay? Merong certain industries na, ayun, it would depend kasi on how the demand for the product changes. Ano? Kapag yung demand is biglang tumaas, edi syempre, kailangan nilang i-supply or yung additional demand na yun. So, they're going to produce more of their products. Okay? So, kumbaga, andyan yung opportunity, maraming bibili, maraming buyer. So, you have to produce more. Okay? So, kumbaga, kailangan may nakantabay sila doon na fund or resources for that. Hindi nila ihahayaan lang na mag-pass by yung opportunity by producing the same number of products na pinoproduce nila before. Ano, they have to be able to adapt to the current situation. Okay, tapos yung budget variances na nga, yung difference between the budget, tapos yung actual. If may difference, that's what we call variance. Okay? Okay, yung two common variances natin, flexible budget variance and sales volume variance. Okay? Ito yung normal flexible budget. Ano? Tapos yung sales volume variance, kapag siya ay tawag dito, kumbaga nagkaroon ng variance kasi nga magkaiba yung number of output na na-produce. Kunwari, nasa budget is 100,000 units. Pero yung na-produce is 105,000 units. Okay? So, merong difference. Definitely magkakaroon ng difference dun sa budget. Kasi nga, meron din difference with the actual volume na planned saka produced. Okay? Yung planned niya is 100,000 lang, pero yung na-produce niya is 105. O, edi, expected magkakaroon talaga ng variance. Ano? Flexible budget variance compares the flexible budget to actual results to determine the effects that prices or costs have had on operations. Since sa flexible, yung normal lang, regardless of production volume, ito yung budget, tapos ito yung actual. Ang possibility naman kung bakit nagkakaroon ng variances is, let's say, nagkaroon ng inflation, tumaas ang prices ng mga bilihin, okay? So, compared to last year, syempre, medyo mas mataas ng konti ngayon yung actual, So, yun. By comparison, sales volume, ito ay nakadepende sa level of sales activity. Okay? From these two budgets, a company can develop individual, flexible, and static budgets for any elements of its operations. Yung variances, it could be favorable or unfavorable. Okay? Income muna tayo. Pag income, pag mas mataas yung actual, compared sa budget, syempre, favorable yun. Kasi mas malaki yung kinita ng company kesa dun sa estimate. Okay? Pero pag siya ay mas mababa, edi siya ay unfavorable. Kasi na-expect mo 1 million, pero yung actual is 900,000 lang. So, unfavorable yung variance. Okay? Yan ay sa part ng revenue. Pagdating sa expenses, di ba ang expenses, kagastusan. So, kapag mas mababa yung budget compared sa actual, mas mababa yung budgeted kesa sa actual. Ibig sabihin, mas malaki yung nagastos ng company. So, unfavorable yung ganong type ng variance. Yung opposite, kapag mas mababa yung actual kesa dun sa budgeted, ibig sabihin, mas kukonti yung nagastos ng company, edi favorable variance yon. So, hindi siya automatic na pag mas mababa, favorable or kapag mas mataas, unfavorable. It would depend on revenue ba yung item na yan or expense ba yung item na yan. Okay? Sales volume is unfavorable. Yung budget ay mas mababa kaysa sa static budget. Never mind that. Company sales turn out to be less than anticipated. Ito naman yung sales mas mababa kaysa dun sa anticipated. So, unfavorable siya. Kasi nga, ina-expect nyo makakabenta kayo ng 1,000,000, ang nabenta nyo lang is 900,000. So, unfavorable yung variance na yun. Okay? If, however, the flexible budget variance was unfavorable, it would be the result of prices or costs. So, pwede namang reason kung bakit unfavorable yung variance is, ito nga yung prices or cost. Kasi compared to last year, tumaas yung prices ngayon ng mga, let's say, raw materials, tumaas din yung wages, ganyan. So, unfavorable siya, pero justifiable naman. Kumbaga, nalaman nyo yung reasoning behind the unfavorable variance. So, in that sense, okay lang. Kasi justified or reasonable naman siya. Ang magiging concern nyo lang, ay kapag what's the reason? Bakit may variance na unfavorable? Okay, tapos hindi nyo explain na maayos. So, there could be something else going on. Okay? By knowing where the company is falling short or exceeding the mark, managers can evaluate the company's performance more efficiently. And especially kung may, departments na nagagawa din yung iba't ibang department. So, makikita yung performance ng bawat department. Ayan. Tapos, based from that, they can make necessary changes. What to improve in those departments, ganyan. Important, the flexible budget can help companies account for both variable and fixed expenses, creating a more dynamic process and leading to more accurate forecasts. Okay, so pag-i-implement ng budget, expenses pop up from time to time. Okay, so sometimes, diba, you have your budget already, tapos later on, biglang merong may dumating po na ganitong expenses, merong babayaran daw sa ganito, ganyan. Okay? Or hindi nyo na-anticipate, biglang tinaasan ng wage board ang, minimum wage. So, tataas ang budget for salaries and wages. So, ayan. So, merong mga unexpected expenses pa din naman. And of course, you have no choice but to comply, lalo na kung yun ay, diba, minimum wage. You have to follow that. So, ayan. Should be able to adapt pa rin naman to such contingencies. Okay? So, static budgets typically act as a guideline. Kumbaga, pinakang guide pa lang siya. They can be changed or adjusted once the variances have been identified via a flexible budget. Okay? So, kunwari, na-determine nyo na compared to last year, tumaas po talaga ang prices ng mga raw materials for this year. So, we'd like to ask for, additional budget for pambili ng raw materials. Okay? So, may mga ganang instances. Okay? Or, you have other situations pa rin naman which would justify increasing your budget. Na kailangan lang namang ipa-approve sa management. Alright? Understanding the different types of budgeting, managers can gain a wealth of information through the analysis of budget variances, leading to better informed business decisions. So yung pinaka-main point kung bakit merong budget ang mga companies. Kasi nakakatulong din naman on, the management. Paano ipatakbuhin yung business. Okay? And in a way, it's pinaka-core din talaga ng business operations, yung pagkakaroon ng budget. Kasi kumbaga, alam mo, magkano lang yung limit mo, magkano yung pwede mong gastusin. Unlike dun sa you are blindly, operating, blindly spending money, hindi mo alam kung sumobra ka na ba, or within the budget pa, or within the kakayanan pa ng company na mag-generate ng income. Yan, di ba? That's why budgets are important. Alright? So, ayan lang. Hanggang dito na lang yung discussion natin. Thanks and bye.